I want to welcome you back to the D-Lo Show. I am your host, Ryan D-Lo Delosier. Today we're going to be doing an update episode, and we're going to revisit an episode that I covered back in February 3rd, and we'll kind of mix in a few other episodes that I've done in the past too. But the one I did back on February 3rd, it was called The Nickoloff Farmhouse, When Life Doesn't Mean Forever. And it was a story that began in the winter of 1988, and it was the Nickoloff family murder. I'm going to go back to that here real quick. Before we do get into this, though, I want to have talk to you about who was lost, like who were the Nickoloffs. So it was Mike and Dorothy Nickoloff. They were living their lives, and they had been farmers, and they weren't just names on a police report. Okay, Mike, he was a fixture of the valley, known for his grit and his love for his family, and then Dorothy was the heart of the home. Their daughter, Marlene, described them as people who lived the American dream. Okay, they were down it's Parker, Washington is what it's called, where they were at. So it's just south of Yakima, like just south of Union Gap, and then basically between Union Gap and Wapato on a map right there. A little like not a municipality quite place, but it's just a little place that they refer to as Parker. So in a small town, people like the Nickoloffs, they represent safety. And when they were targeted, it didn't just hurt their family, shattered the sense of security for everyone in the Yakima Valley. They weren't the kind of people who would just they were the kind of people who would just help a stranger who came in and just ask them for anything, even if they knocked on their door in the middle of the night. They'd want to help these people. So that kindness is what these killers exploited. So two 17-year-olds named Russell Dwayne McNeil and then Herbert Rice, they showed up at the Nickoloff home, and they didn't kick the door down. They didn't wear masks or anything like that. They just knocked on the door and they asked for a glass of water. And then they asked to use the phone. And when they were let in, they killed them. They killed the Nickoloffs. And it was brutal. Okay. In the 1980s in Yakima, it was a violent time. Okay. The files show that this particular case happened during a spike in crime, 1988 again. The prosecutor at the time was Jeff Sullivan, and he decided that he needed to send a message. So he was going to put these kids down for the death penalty, okay, on that as well, too. So they were, I believe, 16, 17 years old. Actually, it says, so they were, I can't remember how old they were when they did this. But anyways, they were pretty young when they came in and killed the Nickoloff family right there. So, and again, we talked about it, how Mike and Dorothy, they were staples of our community. They had their lives taken. And basically what happened is they came in and they stole a pack of cigarettes and 2 television sets. And for decades, the names of them that were there, it was Russell McNeil and then Herbert Chief Rice. The crimes were senseless that they did right there. They were both 17 and they didn't get the death penalty, but they were sentenced to die in prison with a life sentence. So, but as of late 2023, the clock started ticking on their release. So I believe that they are set possibly to be paroled in 2028 if things go if they behave themselves. And I think Herbert Rice is probably on the right track. I've seen some stuff about him, how he's changed his way in jail. So we'll see. Sometimes he'll rehabilitate, but a lot of times it doesn't happen. So today I also want to contrast this with a more recent name that we looked at. So Shaylin Altus, I just did an episode very recently on Shaylin and the murder that she did when she was 16 years old. I can go back to that. So she murdered Patrick M. Altus. He was a 39-year-old father of 2. He was known by friends and family as a kind and gentle man, and he was always there to help someone in need. He was a former FedEx driver, a firefighter. He worked search and rescue, and he helped at the county fair. He did a lot of stuff. So during the trial, the defense attorney described Patrick as someone who collected strays. And so what happened is these two, Shaylin Altus and then her boyfriend, came in, and Patrick took care of them. So Shaylin was Patrick's niece, Shaylin's uncle. And after her father Shaylin's father said that she was uncontrollable. So not long after, Patrick drove to Yakima to help find another niece who had run away from the Youth Crisis Center. And when he found her, it was 16-year-old friend Parker M. Backhold. So both of these 2 individuals, Parker and then Shaylin, they both wound up killing Patrick Altus. And after the murder, Shaylin and Parker, they stole the truck, they stole guns and this happened way up north it's like up north of Omak not Yakima, in Washington. But they stole the truck, they stole guns, they stole Patrick's wallet, and then they fled to Oregon. And during their escape, they actually were stopped by an Oregon State Patrol trooper. And according to police, the teams gave the trooper false names. So by October 6th of this, when this happened, so September of 2014, when the murder happened, so October 6th, the day after Patrick's body was found, authorities tracked the teens down, and they were arrested at a hotel in Curtin, Oregon, where Parker's father lived. And then once in custody, the two 16-year-olds pointed the finger at each other. Shaylin claimed that she had gone to sleep at 10 p.m. to get ready for school the next day, and she told detectives she woke up to the sound of one gunshot, then silence, then a second shot. She stated that Parker came into the bedroom, told her he had killed her uncle, and then forced her to pack her things and leave at gunpoint. And this is what Shaylin said. She claimed she was too afraid to run or tell the Oregon trooper her real name because Parker was controlling her. And Parker's story was completely different. He claimed that he woke up to the sound of a gunshot, just the opposite of that, and then walked out of his room to find Shaylin standing near the couch, having just shot her uncle with a .22 caliber. Parker stated that Patrick was bleeding. So Patrick Altus, the 39-year-old uncle, he was bleeding from a substantial injury, cursing and yelling that he'd been shot. So Parker testified he then went and grabbed a .410 shotgun and fired one fatal round into Patrick's face. And Parker also alleged that it was Shaylin who put the plastic bag over Uncle's head and then also stole his wallet. So ultimately, Parker pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder, along with other charges like robbery and theft, and he was sentenced to 30 years. Shaylin, however, she took her chances at a jury trial, so she didn't do a plea deal. And the prosecution argued that she fired the first shot that went through her uncle's wrist, making her equally culpable as an accomplice. And then the jury didn't buy her story of being an innocent hostage. So they just didn't go along with that. And they found her guilty of first degree premeditated murder, robbery, and theft. The judge initially sentenced her to 38 years and 4 months behind bars, but the legal proceedings didn't stop there. So 2014 was when it happened. In 2019, an appellate court tossed out Shaylin's 38-year sentence. The court ruled that during her initial sentencing, the judge had incorrectly denied a pre-sentence report that would have explored mitigating circumstances, specifically the fact that she was only 16 at the time, and then her family history. She had past trauma, she was abused, and kidnapped also as well too. So upon her court resentencing, Shaylin's sentence was reduced to 360 months, 30 years, which equates to your 30, like I said, 30 years. So, those were a couple of pretty heavy stories that we covered not too long ago. Some of them recent, some of them, going back. So, with this, as we go back and look at these, I know I also covered another case, Kimberly Hansen. And if you remember her, she was one who she actually wound up shooting her husband in Yakima in 2020. And the prosecutor dropped those charges entirely, calling it a justified homicide. Okay, her husband was abusing her, and actually Kimberly even said that she was tied up. And then, in fact, her husband was actually at the time when he was over at the house, and when Kimberly killed him, he was in violation of a no contact order. So this one, I mean, it's self-defense is tough anyways, but her attorney famously wound up saying when they were trying to get her bail, in some of the early trials or in some of the early proceedings, she was only a danger to people who beat and strangle her. So she was actually Kimberly Hansen the charges were dropped, and I think they were with prejudice, so they could come back if something came back later. But that was in 2020, so nothing has come back since then to say no other evidence and anything like that to say that she could be guilty. And to me, that definitely sounds like a case where she was just being taken advantage of. It was a domestic violence situation, and she drugged and tied up and everything as well too that went along with it. And it seems like the problem got taken care of that way. But I actually called that one justified homicide. So we go back to these three. We have the Nikoloff murders, where those guys are going to be out in 2028. We have Kimberly Hansen, who got away with murder. And then Shaylin Altus, she was 16, she was young, but she, why wasn't she treated the same way? So if you look at the court records, the answer is frustratingly technical. Okay. So during Shaylin's trial in 2014, her defense team went with what's called it's a general denial, where she just denied that she shot anybody. Okay. And she testified that she was asleep when the shooting happened, and that her friend, Parker Bachtold, acted alone. So by saying, I didn't do it, kind of throwing her hands up and saying, it wasn't me, I didn't do it, I was sleeping, she legally locked herself out of saying, I did it because I was being abused. And there is a recent podcast that came out where, Shaylin actually admits in that she says, I mean, she's in jail, so you got to go with that. But, that she says that she was, being abused by Patrick Altus, her uncle. So when she said I didn't do it, that kind of threw her out of threw away her option to be able to say that she was abused, because if she didn't do it, and then why did he die, and why are you saying that it happened because you're? So she basically, by saying giving it that general denial defense. She locked herself out of saying I did it because I was abused. Okay, you can't have it both ways in front of a jury. Because of that choice, the prosecution was able to block almost all evidence of her uncle's alleged behavior. So they were able to just, like, that stuff didn't come up in trial, because that would not have been a reason why her boyfriend Parker had killed Patrick. You know, it was because she didn't, now if she had killed him, she could have used all that stuff. So to the jury, Shaylin wasn't a victim fighting back. She was a cold-blooded accomplice who helped practice shooting and then stole her uncle's truck to flee. So it wasn't until her appeal, that was led by Christina Nichols and Jill Schumacher Reuter, that the court finally acknowledged the hallmarks of youth. Say she's 16 years old again. I mean, 30 years. We have laws in the state of Washington that when you're 16, your brain is not fully developed. As many of us know, I know when I was married, I was under 25, and I had to pay a premium for car insurance because I have a stupid boy brain at the time, where I was a higher risk according to insurance actuators. So, and so when they went back and looked at it, obviously 16-year-old brain is not fully developed either. So her sentence was cut down from 38 years to 30 years. And the legal landscape for juveniles in Washington State has shifted massively since those initial convictions. So since what happened in 2014, and now we're in 2026, 12 plus years later. In Washington State, a 17-year-old convicted, so this is the law that goes along with it. It's actually a court case. There's a Washington State Supreme Court case that goes along with this, and it's called State versus Bassett. And so in Washington State, if a 17-year-old convicted of aggravated first-degree murder can no longer be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. So the Washington Supreme Court ruled in 2018 in a case called State versus Bassett, as I mentioned earlier, that mandatory life without parole for juveniles is categorically unconstitutional. So this ruling was a game changer. It cited neuroscience regarding adolescent brain development. It meant that any sentence given to a juvenile must provide, and I quote, a meaningful opportunity for release. So these juveniles must have some sort of opportunity to be able to get out of jail at some point. So going back to I wanted to actually take a look at the case, like I went and looked at this too. So State versus Bassett. If we look at Brian Bassett, who it's named after, in 1995, this is what he did. He was 16 years old, just the same as Shaylin Altus, 1995 versus 2014. So you're looking at almost 20 years later. But anyways, Brian Bassett, he murdered his parents. He murdered a 5-year-old brother, and the judge actually called him, so both parents and a 5-year-old brother. It's hideous what he did too. He actually held his brother underwater. So it killed his parents with a gun and then drowned his 5-year-old brother. So yeah. The judge called him a walking advertisement for the death penalty and gave him 3 consecutive life terms without parole. But because of that 2018 ruling, the state versus Bassett, which applied retroactively, his sentence was reviewed. And in January of 2024, after nearly 28 years and demonstrating significant rehabilitation, Brian Bassett is now released into community custody. So he's on parole, still got to check in and do all the things he needs to do as a parolee, but he's out of jail right now. So a guy who at 16 years old murdered his parents and 5-year-old brother by holding him underwater until he drowned. Let that sink in. Yeah, he's out now. So the 16-year-old brain, and I don't know this individual, probably could be rehabilitated. I don't know much more beyond that, but a lot of things change between when you're 16 and I know where I'm at right now. I'm 49. I know that I've learned a few things since then. So I know that I don't know as much as I knew back then, and that's probably a pretty significant improvement in my intelligence. So when we come back to Shaylin Altus, she's currently 27 years old, still in custody at the Washington Correction Center for Women, Okay, and if we're looking at her case, like if we believe what she said, that she was abused by her killer, Patrick Altus, and then she killed him, she's in jail. She's been in jail since 2014, and so we're looking at 12 years in jail right now. And hers is it's not even a necessarily, I mean, if that's it, if it's in self-defense. Now, she was convicted of first-degree murder, so she was in there for 38 years. It got reduced down to 30. She's got still more than half of her, she hasn't even covered half of her sentence yet. So, go back to the Nikoloff case. Okay, that the crime was predatory. Okay, the Nikoloffs. We go back to those two individuals who went in and killed the Nikoloff family, the 80-something-year-old Nikoloff family, and they knocked on the door and asked for a glass of water and to use the phone, and then they killed them and stole their TV and a pack of cigarettes. Yeah, those kids. They were targeting strangers for gain. They are looking to get out here in 2028. And then in the Altus and Hansen cases, the violence was contained within the four walls of a home right there. Say they would, like Altus and Hansen, they both killed an individual who was in the house they were in, like a domestic situation where the Nikoloff murderers, they wound up going to find someone to kill. These ones right here. Bassett, he actually killed his own, it was a domestic situation as well too. So is a teenager who strikes back at a guardian a threat to the public, or a child who was left with no other exit? All right, then we move along right here, and I want to take a look at another individual as well too. So I also talked about in an earlier episode, Jose Franco Jr. He's the one who went by. He's actually currently sitting in Yakima juvenile detention right now. So a victim. This is the story here is it's what is it called? I'm looking for the name of the episode. Inglewood Avenue, a community in mourning and a cycle of youth violence that goes along with that. And so this was the case. Basically on December 23rd, so right before Christmas of 2025, Francisco Serrano Martinez, he was fatally shot in a drive-by shooting near 20th and Inglewood Avenues. Okay, and then what happened is Francisco was walking, and then Jose pulled up, they drove by, and then basically asked him and his, I forget who Francisco was walking with, but he had another person with him. Maybe I'll just read through this right here. So, Franco is being tried as an adult. The charges are extensive, so including first and second degree murder, 2 counts of first degree assault, and multiple counts of drive-by shooting. I even looked today and he's still there. He's got a hearing coming up in, I think next week, March 13th, I think is when we'll be hearing more about him, shortly. Police have identified Franco as having ties to a local street gang, and at the time of the shooting, he was already on probation for a firearm conviction. So you see how that works. Like, he was in a shooting right now, but he's on probation for a firearm conviction, but yet he has a firearm in his hand and he's able to shoot, allegedly, because he's still innocent until proven guilty, because he hasn't gone through, hasn't confessed, or he hasn't been convicted in a court of law. But if that does end up being the case, we have another child, 17-year-old Jose Franco, who has a gun, and he was released on probation for a firearm conviction. Yes, another thing to let us set in. So as of today, Franco still remains in custody at the Yakima County Juvenile Detention Center. He has a $1 million bail set for him, and kind of looking at some of the other things that go along with that. So he's in jail still, and just waiting for what's going to happen with him. So again, he's 17, so he's under that age of he cannot get life in prison, although he has quite an extensive rap sheet already. So he's currently in jail. I did take a look today, and he has a triage hearing. I know I mentioned this for March 13th, and a triage hearing is it's an early preliminary court proceeding designed to assess the urgency, the complexity, and the risk factors of the case, particularly in family or restraining order matters. So that's not the point in this one, but to direct it toward the appropriate legal pathway. So they're kind of looking at where they're going to go with this. I don't know if we'll get a plea deal out of it. We'll kind of see where it goes, but it's a triage hearing. It helps the judges, the lawyers, and parties determine if the case requires immediate intervention, mediation, or a full trial. So the prosecutor in this case is Joseph Brown, and the defense counsel, at least for this one, is going to be Kenneth Theron. And I saw that another Theron in the family. I'm guessing it's either a spouse or a child of Kenneth, who's also worked with Jose on other cases. So I'm going to do a little deeper dive in that, I think, later. That's one I wanted to get into. So, as McNeil and Rice, McNeil and Rice are the ones who killed the Nikoloff the family. as McNeil and Rice prepare for their potential release in 2028 and Shaylin Altus continues her sentence, we have to ask ourselves if our system is finally learning the difference between criminal and survivor. Is there a difference between someone who is a criminal who goes in, breaks into a house, steals cigarettes, steals TV, and then kills the people there, or someone who asks someone as they're driving down the street, "Are you in a gang?" And and the gang, the kids walking down the street say no, and they shoot them in the back. Or if there is one who goes in and kills his mom, kills his dad, and then drowns his 5-year-old brother. So criminal or a survivor, say in Shaylin, you have your uncle that's abusing you and you've finally had enough, or in Kimberly Hansen, you've been tied up to the bed, you've been drugged, you've been taken advantage of, abused in ways that I don't really want to mention right here. You become a survivor of that as well too. So does our legal system know the difference between those two? Or are we learning the difference between those two, between a criminal and then a survivor? Same, lot of similarities right here. So we compared a lot of cases that we go through. I'd really like to hear from you. If you have ideas on this as well too, you can join in the conversation. I'm on social media at the Delo Show on. Now, like you've probably seen it on social media, and if you have, you can find me there. I'm on Facebook. I am on Instagram and on lots of other stuff as well too. So Instagram, and you can find me there. I would really like to hear, what you think of this as well too. So does general denial, does that feel like a failure of the system? Like what happened in the Shaylin Altus case where she just denied that she did it, and then the court system wasn't able to go in and look at the abuse and actually make it right, even though she lied about it. But a lot of times when you're abused, and you're 16 years old, you might, and I guess, I would imagine that she didn't have parents take care of her. She was up in an area where the person that she killed was also volunteered for a bunch of stuff and was seen as a pillar of the community, but a pillar of the community who also may have been taking advantage of her as well and abusing her as well. So is that I feel like she probably didn't get the best defense counsel, not to say that but I would imagine she probably got a public defender that goes along with that too. Not that they do a bad job, but may have gotten, so if she had gotten some better advice instead of taking the general denial defense, but could the court have fixed that? Or, is the general denial just a fair rule of the game? Head on over to my social media pages to check that out and see what you think of what I've done here so far with these ones. So I'm going to continue to go down some of these deep dives into these other cases, and I'm going to continue to check things out. I do want to encourage you to go and check out my latest episodes. If you haven't heard you haven't listened to one on the Nikoloff family, go back and take a look at that one. If you want to take a look, so I'm going to look at some of them right here. So if we have the Nikoloff family, that was the case for that one was the Nikoloff Farmhouse, When Life Doesn't Mean Forever. That was published February 3rd of 2026. If we go back and look at the Hansen murder right here, it's called Justified Homicide. It was one of the earlier ones I did. Actually, it's quite a ways back. So August 20th of 2025, I actually think there's video that goes along with that one. I tried video early on with things as well too. And then if we go to the Altus murder, it was called The Good Samaritan, or The Hidden Predator, the Shaylin Altus story. So thank you for hanging around with me and listening to my podcast. If you like what you're hearing, go ahead and give me that 5-star review, and I hope that you have an awesome day.